So here's going to be a quick explanation of the subcultural explanations of crime and deviance, part of AQA Sociology for the crime and deviance topic. So the first thing that subcultural theories, they developed in the 50s and 60s. They came as a response of what functionalists were putting forward as explanations of crime. So they were influenced by the work of Merton and other sort of ecological theories, but they're not directly linked to functionalism. Their own set of theories with a connection or an inspiration from functionalism. And what subcultural theories do that kind of builds on Merton's work is they try to focus on the individuals who would be committing crime and also trying to explain the motivations they would have. Generally, functionalism tends to explain the role of crime, the benefit of crime, so it is a kind of a development of those early ideas. So the first thinker we have is Cohen, who talks about the structure of delinquency or alternative status hierarchies. Essentially for Cohen, he suggested that individuals commit crime for a number of reasons, and his main criticism of Merton was that crime and deviance was a collective response. It wasn't just an individual reaction or response, it was a collective decision. He also highlighted that Merton didn't talk about non-profitable crime or non-utilitarian crime. So what Merton really focused on was working class boys choosing alternative paths to success. So they were replacing the mainstream values with an alternative set of ideas, and that's how they were achieving a status. And again, the idea that it generally was a rejection of mainstream values. So generally vandalism being used. So Cohen's argument was suggesting that working class boys wanted success, couldn't achieve it, they turned to crime. And one of the things that Cohen was suggesting was that these boys suffer a status frustration. So they turned to delinquency because the sort of legitimate means of achieving success were blocked to them, and they'd gain status from within their peer group through conflict, through violence, and through other forms of deviance. So essentially, to solve status frustration, they created their own sort of status to aspire to. There are criticisms of what Cohen put forward. So again, most working class deviants, are they really challenging the middle class values? Are they deliberately being rebellious, or is it they're just committing the delinquent acts for the fun of it? So Ling and her studies of edge work would kind of question the kind of almost the motivation, the awareness of the individuals committing these crimes. Box, who's a Marxist, says that Cohen was wrong to assume that these working class boys had originally accepted the mainstream values, that failure to achieve, inability to achieve them would lead to deviance, and obviously feeling the need for status through deviant means. However, Cohen does explain that not every act of criminal behaviour has to have a monetary reward. So this does highlight that there is crimes that have no monetary value, and it kind of fills a gap in Merton's work. Sutherland also supports this idea of differential association. So the idea that a lot of teenagers will socialise and be raised in an environment where criminal behaviour is influential on their decisions. So it does have a connection to what Cohen put forward. Cloward and Ohlin focus on delinquency and opportunity. So they again build on the original work of Merton. They criticise what Cohen put forward, saying that it isn't just a subcultural response and status frustration response. They identify several different types of response. There's arguments that all build on the idea that legitimate means of opportunity are blocked, and so young people turn to illegitimate opportunity structures. Now, in Cloward and Nolan's argument, they provide 3 different criminal subcultures that young people can form or join. The first of these is the criminal subculture. These are already in areas where there's a developed or established criminal organisation like a mafia or an established gang. The conflict subculture is more likely to emerge in a disorganised environment where there's a high population turnover, there's no organised or formal criminal gangs to join. So again, it's often characterised by violence and gang warfare. Very similar to Cohen, with these kind of informal structured groups forming together and kind of finding conflict with one another. And a retreatist subculture is, again, a bit like in Merton's argument, individuals who have failed at the conflict, they've failed at the criminal, and therefore they've turned to maybe drugs, alcohol, prostitution, where they're retreating away from society. The main benefit or strength of Cloward and Ohlin is they're not just explaining working class deviance, and it's not just a concern with material or monetary gain. So again, they're continuing that non-utilitarian crime, but they do ignore there is a lot of overlap between subcultures. So for example, a criminal subculture that, like a mafia, will deal within drugs, which is linked to the retreatists. There'll be violence involved, which will link to the conflict. Now Miller has a slightly different approach to this. Talks about focal concerns. So Miller's argument, again, different to Cohen, argues that juvenile delinquents don't just commit crime because of status frustration, but he argues it's because of their focal concerns. Miller's argument tends to think that the working class are socialized into a set of values which become more essential in their lives. So for Miller, the main focal concerns were linked to trying to survive low paid, low excitement working class jobs, and these focal concerns provide a release for these young individuals, and they're passed down through families. The main focal concerns for Miller was toughness, smartness, and excitement, and this could explain working class crime by trying to achieve these focal concerns. There is very little evidence of what Miller's putting forward to suggest that working class males have their own set of values. They're not also values unique to the working class. We can't really assume that all working class men are the same. So Miller is overgeneralizing, making quite broad assumptions. And new right thinkers like Murray would potentially support Miller, suggesting that these are the values which lead to the sort of permissiveness and dependency culture that, in Murray's view, signifies the underclass. And last but not least, we have Matza. Now Matza also is talking about subcultural theories, but is a real evaluative argument. So essentially, if you had an essay, you would argue the 3 different subcultural approaches and then evaluate it with Matza. Matza is an interactionist and generally disagrees with these theories. All these theories assume that these individuals are permanently part of a subculture, deviating from norms and values and leading to criminal behaviour. Matza's argument is that delinquency is far more fluid and flexible. Individuals drift between delinquency and conformist behaviour over their lifetimes, or between a day or over a week. They're drifting between the two, and this is what Matza called subterranean values. So individuals drift into subterranean values where they are expressing or achieving values which maybe are not normally acceptable in society. Matza highlighted that the techniques of neutralization used by these groups justifies deviant behavior in these incidences, and also reinforms that these are not permanent decisions to be deviant, to be involved in conflict or crime, but it's a temporary position people drift into, and then will leave it and become more conformist. And it's often if individuals are caught or identified or labelled while in the midst of a deviant act, that's where the label might stick and then develop into deviant careers. So it does have a connection to labelling theory. And often, as what Matza suggests, is that most people drift in and out, particularly the young who are in this sort of unstable period of transition and development. And there we have it. So a slightly longer video here, talking about the subcultural theories of crime. Really important theories here. I think this is a really good topic because it covers essentially 4 arguments, 3 of which are making the case for subcultural theory, 1 which is disagreeing with all of the approaches, and there are evaluative points how each theory generally tends to disagree with Cohen, who started the process off. You can even make the broader link that this has connections to functionalism as an inspiration. Hopefully this has been of help. I know this is a lot of content here, so hopefully this has clarified it a little bit for you and might provide a bit of insight into how these things work. As always, thanks for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and obviously tell your friends about this video. And again, good luck with any essays that may link to this topic.